What's up YouTube? I'm the Planet Rocks and welcome for another playthrough of Our Life. We just finished up Sandcastle last time, in which Shiloh really got pissed at Cove for being embarrassed. It was quite something. Anyway, so we're going to be playing Fireflies today, which is the last moment of step 1, and then we're going to click and then the summer ended and see what happens from there. Alright, so here we go. And hello, Lizzie. Just delving right into it. Tonight we're going to catch fireflies. At this blunt declaration from your sister, you looked up from your macaroni and cheese dinner. Fireflies were a familiar sight over summer, coming out on warm nights to dance through the sky. Tonight was particularly balmy. You knew there were bound to be a ton of them around. Oh, you are you? Yeah, I would love to do that. I remember I loved fireflies as a child, and I love them now too. You rocked lightly from side to side in your seat, already excited for your after-dinner activity. Catching fireflies was a great way to spend a summer evening, and you could already envision the little lightning bugs drifting through the darkened sky. That's a good idea, Lizzie. Can we, Mrs. Donovan? Shiloh tapped his fork against the table excitedly, his face lighting up as he looked at Lizzie. It was unusual for Shiloh to still be here. Like always, his mom had to bring him over really early in the morning before her job started. But normally, she would have picked him up by now. She called before dinner to let your moms know she'd be late. You didn't hear why. Probably more work things. You thought maybe getting to hang out with Shiloh for longer is what made Lizzie want to keep running around outside. Staying at home and watching TV was never an option for her with guests over. That's why you were pretty sure she'd get your moms to agree.
Well,
It's already so dark out there. Lizzie gave Mom the best puppy dog eyes she could, slowly spooning mac and cheese into her mouth while you waited there for their response.
there.
Let them go. Nights like this don't happen every day. Your parents exchanged a look. Then Mom eventually sighed and nodded back. Yes! Along with Lizzie's cheers, you threw your arms up in triumph, but waited until you'd finished chewing to say anything, because you knew it was rude to talk with your mouth full.
Fine.
Fine. Just make sure you stay on the hill behind our house with all the poppies, okay?
Duh.
Duh, Mom. That's where most of them are. The idea had only just been planted in your head, but already you could just picture all the glowing lights spread out in front of you, like the fairies from the bedtime stories Mommy read sometimes. All too quickly it became a race to see who could finish their food first. No choking at the dinner table now. That's right, if someone died we'd have to cancel the Firefly trip after all. Mom said it like a joke, but you knew that they were both telling you kids to slow down. Shiloh did immediately. When you glanced at Lizzie, you saw her still eating faster than she should. Elizabeth.
Jeez.
No one is gonna die. Sheesh. A knock on the door interrupted Mom before she could no doubt scold her sister. I'll get it. Your big sister jumped out of her seat and ran over to the door, pulling it open without even looking out the window to see who it was.
Huh?
You shifted in your seat to try and get a glimpse of the unexpected guest.
Aye.
Good evening, Cove. Your mommy had already walked to the door by the time you managed to see past Shiloh's flappy hat. A big smile stretched across your face. When you lifted your hand and waved, Cove's pink cast went up to return it shortly after. It didn't matter why he was there. It meant he could join you all in catching fireflies. Then for a few seconds Cove said nothing. He only stood there and looked up at your mommy with a face almost like he was considering turning around and leaving. My dad told me to drop this off because I guess he borrowed it from you. Cove took a familiar screwdriver from out of his large side pocket, eyes now dropped to the floor. We left ours back home when we moved. Great, thanks, bye.
Thank you.
Here, why don't you come inside for a bit? Lizzie crossed her arms and lifted her chin. Cove shrugged and Mom stood from the table too. I'll give your dad a call to let him know you got here all right. Cove shuffled fully inside, eyes remaining on the ground. Mommy closed the door behind him.
Hi.
Hi, Cove. Shiloh gave Cole a friendly smile while waving by holding up his hand and opening and closing his fingers. Cove nodded in response. Cove, are you going to catch fireflies with us? You could come outside with us if you want to. You weren't sure what to say. Like this one. You could see Lizzie eyeing you for mentioning the excursion to an outsider, but she'd get over it. You dragged your foot over the floor in front of you, feeling too shy to say any more.
Yeah.
I can do that. I've never caught one before. It's too bad he didn't have a chance before now. The fireflies weren't out when he first moved in, and there must not have been anywhere he used to live. We can't go until after dinner. After she pointed this out, Lizzie walked back to the table and took her seat. There wasn't much left on her plate. Since this was very true, you decided to finish up your own stuff as well. Cove stepped closer and eyed what was on the menu for your family's meal. Have you eaten yet? Yeah, my dad and I ate earlier. What did you have? Eggs. The clipped, one-word answer seemed to discourage Shiloh from asking any more questions. His eyes slowly wandered back to the last scraps of food on his plate. Her phone call with Cove's dad must have ended because your mom came back into the room.
Okay.
Cove, your dad said you can stay for a little while if you'd like, but he's going to come get you before it gets too much later. Sure.
Fun.
Oh, fun. This will be so nice. As you polished off the meal, you hoped it would be too. The three of you all finished eating shortly after, and Lizzie led the way outside. Remember, don't stray too far. It's fine, Mom. Shiloh trailed so closely after Lizzie he was nearly stepping on her heels. Cove hesitated at the door. You smiled lightly at Cove, gesturing for him to follow. After a moment, he did.
Bye.
Bye, children. The two of you were a good 10 or 15 feet behind Lizzie and Shiloh by the time you walked outside. You pushed the door shut behind you, watching their figures get farther and farther away.
Hurry up!
You're so slow, Jamie. We don't have all night. You started to run when you heard Lizzie's voice calling you, but paused when you saw Cove still walking at a relaxed pace. You fell behind, sidling up next to him and matching his stride. He noticed right away.
It's okay.
You can go ahead if you want. You smile and shake your head. After a short while, the two of you reached the hill behind the house. The fireflies were out in full force, floating on the breeze, their gentle glow winking in and out and creating an almost magical effect. Lizzie had already climbed to the top. Shiloh was spinning in circles somewhere around the middle.
Wow.
Shiloh took a moment to come over and welcome the both of you to the hill. Hi guys, it's really great out, huh? See how many there are? Yeah. A firefly danced through the air, landing on Cove's sea-green head. You had to admit, it was a pretty funny sight, especially when Cove didn't know it was there. What?
Oh,
Look, Lizzie has one. That's amazing. Shiloh ran to the highest point of the hill, making sure not to lose his hat or backpack along the way. You hummed as the group divided and conquered, shifting your gaze to the dozens of other fireflies sailing around. The game was on. Spotting one close by, you approached it with a assassin-like stealth, crouching down to make yourself seem like less of a threat. Slowly dragging one foot in front of the other, you crept up towards it, arms outstretched. You closed your hands around the little glowing orb, careful not to crush it. The firefly landed on your palm, almost docile, and you stared down at your prize in delight. Its tiny legs tickled your skin, and you giggled at the sensation. Cove kept up with his own target, but when he tried to grab it, his pink cast waved awkwardly through the air, foiling his efforts to clap his hands around the firefly. Cove watched it vanish into thin air with a dissatisfied expression on his face. He walked up beside him and gave him an encouraging smile. "Did you catch one?" You nodded, and Cove gave up his hunt for the moment, coming closer and peering at the insect still crawling across your palm. You held out your hand, and he leaned closer, eyes widening a tad behind his glasses. Cove remained hypnotized by the little bug as he inched his hand closer to yours. Ultimately, he settled his fingers lightly over top of the ones you were holding open. It tingled. You stayed very still. You were so nervous you thought you'd stop breathing, but no matter what, you didn't want to scare the shiny treasure. The firefly, noticing the new connection, crawled up into Cove's hand. He quietly gasped. "It worked! Yeah, you got one." Cove's lips turned up into a slow smile, and his eyes shined brighter than the bug. "Thanks, Jamie." With a laugh, he gave the palm of your hand a friendly smack, performing an awkward low five. Startled by the extreme movement, the light disappeared before you could even blink. Your firefly was gone.
Sorry.
That's okay, I couldn't keep it forever.
You're right.
Right, bugs have to stay outside. Let's get another. Uh-huh, we can work together. His face broke out into a wide grin. We'll get a bunch. With renewed vigor, you ran out into the hill. You're not sure how much time passed while you were in the thick of it. All you could focus on was the adventure at hand. No critter was safe from your grasp. At first you tried to keep a tally of how many you had caught, but once the number grew higher than 10, you had no more fingers left to count with. You were having the time of your life, racing up and down the hill with the crash of the ocean and the sound of everyone's laughter echoing in the background. "Jamie, this way!" You followed the sound of Cove's voice to the top of the hill, watching as he stretched his arms in front of him, reaching with his fingers and only narrowly missing his target. Cove and you took turns trying to scare fireflies in the direction of the other. You showed him some techniques that you had learned, like how to cup your hands correctly, and he listened attentively before trying for himself. There were a few times when you almost ran into each other, giggling as you dove to the side at the last moment. Luckily, disaster was avoided each time. It was an overall huge success, with the both of you catching multiple fireflies each. Eventually the fireflies began to thin out, and your energy started to lapse. You decided it was time to call off the hunt. Cove didn't complain. He breathed in heavily, and his face seemed really flushed. That was fun. A lot of fun. You smiled at him broadly, happy that he had enjoyed the activity. Yeah, it was.
Come on!
Jamie, Cove, get up here. We're gonna have a race. The shouting caught you off guard. It had been quite a while since you heard from Lizzie or Shiloh. You glanced over to see them both standing on top of the hill again, Lizzie beckoning to you with quick hand gestures. If she was like that, you knew there wasn't much room for disagreement. Up the incline you went. From the corner of your eye, you saw Cove was coming as well. He didn't care for Lizzie a lot, so you thought he might be intrigued by the idea. Hi.
Cove!
Cove, you can't roll down the hill. You could hurt your arm again. You'll be the referee for the rest of us. As Lizzie pointed this out, Cove froze in place. Oh, it was that kind of race. He frowned down at his cast. That was the second time it got in the way tonight. What? Yeah, you'll watch and see who gets to the bottom first. That's important, got it?
I guess.
The cast was sturdy. If he was careful, he could have done it. Lizzie might have just been looking for a reason to make someone else the referee, but it was already decided. Yeah.
Really?
You don't have to. It's okay, I want to watch. You moved beside him on the top of the hill, even though Lizzie eyed you and made a face. That's not how races work. We only need one referee. Shrugging your shoulders, you refused to budge, and Lizzie let out a huff before throwing her hands in the air. Fine, I'll be the winner, whether you join or not. Lizzie moved to lay down, and Shiloh did the same. Cove stood slightly to the side to get a better vantage point, and you stood next to him. Count down! Cove stood up a little straighter. It seemed like he was taking his newfound referee duty seriously. 3, 2, 1, go! Lizzie and Shiloh took off, letting gravity do the work and rolling at high speed towards the bottom of the hill. You and Cove leaned forward to watch them go, eyes peeled for which of the two of them would reach the bottom first. They were both neck and neck until about halfway down the hill, Lizzie started to veer off to the side, giving Shiloh a huge advantage. She obviously hadn't noticed a thing, and as soon as Shiloh reached the bottom of the hill, he jumped up excitedly and threw his hands in the air. I won! Almost immediately he fell back onto the grass, still dizzy from his roll down the hill. Lizzie stomped out of the bush she had ended up in, spluttering angrily and brushing leaves from the front of her dress. Not bad, you got lucky. Let's do it again and see who wins for real. Kids, it's time to come in. No. You snickered, feeling grateful you hadn't been a part of the mini debacle. You caught Cove's eyes and saw that he was doing the same. It had gotten late and was beginning to feel just a bit chilly as you made your way out of the hills, but the cold in the air hadn't dampened anyone's spirits. The four of you walked back home, together, side by side, down your neighborhood street, discussing the evening, with each person trying to prove that they were the one who caught the most fireflies. You knew that whoever really did catch the most didn't matter much anyway. All that mattered was that you all had a good time, which, judging by the smiles on everyone's faces, you did. Alrighty, let's just go ahead and then summer ended. Sure, yes. I'll never get tired of that view. You stood beside your moms, Lizzie and Cove, as the five of you watched the sun dip into the ocean somewhere far, far away. You liked to imagine it cooling off in the water, resting itself before getting ready to shine brightly again tomorrow. That was a fun day. I didn't know they had magicians on the shopping street now. Neither did I. Oh no, we are so dull. Let's get out more. He didn't do real magic, Mom. How do you figure that one out?
Duh.
'Cause I know. That's not what real magic looks like. Oh, Lizzie dear, there's all kinds of magic in the world. Lizzie gave Mommy a suspicious look, but didn't dispute the claim. You looked over at Cove, who hadn't said a word since you started home. He didn't look upset though, just content. You're aware he still hadn't quite warmed up to your parents. Well, we can't sit out here all night. Time to hurry home and get cooking. Who's helping with dinner? Lizzie immediately let out a groan. Mom, summer's almost over. The protest was obvious. You could practically see school on the horizon. You certainly didn't want to spend your last bits of freedom cooking dinner. You could do that any other day. Please, can we stay just a little longer? We have to keep playing. Mom looked down at you with a sigh, and you clasped your hands together to give your plea some extra appeal. We'll help with dinner tomorrow. You immediately nodded in agreement with the very clever offer, shifting closer to Lizzie since your parents can't possibly resist the power of two combined.
Please.
Soon we'll have homework and reading to do. We can't do work now, too. Lizzie made her case and then stomped her foot into the ground. You mimicked her, feeling that would add something to the argument. Well...
No.
Oh, come on, Pam. I can help you with dinner. Mommy leaned in for a hug, and you knew that you were very close to victory.
Okay.
Alright. But as soon as dinner's ready, you lot are coming inside, understood? Yes, Mom. Yes, Mom. Cove, dear, you're welcome to join us as well. You sent him a small smile, which he returned. Cove gave a non-committal shrug to your mommy, which you took as an agreement. So much to do, so little time. Maybe I could still get the seashell bracelet and tines and trinkets? Oh, Or maybe the playground. Or the fireflies would probably be coming out, right? Don't I get a say in this? Lizzie looked over at you, narrowing her eyes like she was very seriously contemplating the answer to that question. A strong gust of wind made you shiver. Lizzie huffed as she wrapped her arms around herself.
Rude.
Doesn't the wind know that summer's not over yet? That's all Lizzie said before abruptly turning on her heel and heading off in the direction your mothers had gone. Where are you going? I'm going to my room. I have lots to plan if I want to make the most of tomorrow. You thought this over, looking off towards the water again. Lizzie didn't wait, and before long she was disappearing off down the road. Meanwhile, Cove was going in the opposite direction, heading for the beach. Well, we're obviously... yeah. Cove gave you a smile that you couldn't help but return.
Cool.
He made a little gesture that you interpreted as, follow me, and then started heading to the waves. Cove knelt down, picking up something you quickly identified as a smooth rock. He reared his arm back, then tossed it out into the water. Here.
Nothing.
Nothing, really. You tilted your head, wondering over the sudden pensive look on his face. Just thinking. About what? Cove was looking down at his cast, scratching idly at the pink surface even though you were pretty sure he couldn't feel it. His brows were furrowed, and there was a frown on his face.
It's not fair.
I've had to wear this cast for ages. I can't even swim. Cove shrugged and didn't say anything. For a second you thought maybe he didn't know, but finally he sighed. A few weeks. That wasn't too bad, you thought. Then, at least he'd be able to play normally at recess. And you sometimes got to go swimming during the school year, so maybe he could make up for lost time then. Cove let out a huff, plopping down into the sand. I can't believe summer's almost over. You sat down next to him and nodded in agreement, regardless of the sudden topic change. I don't want to go to school. I mean, I would. I don't want to go to a new school. I think it'll be the same school as you and Lizzie. My dad said something about that. Cool, you're going to like it. Everyone's super nice. You'd only ever been to the one school, but you were sure that his old school couldn't have been that much better. Then again, he did have to make new friends and meet new teachers. It could be kinda scary. Cove shook his head, then wrapped his good arm around his knees as he drew them to his chest. You heard a sniffling sound, and when you took a good look at his face, you realized that his eyes were wet.
I want to go home.
You'd never had to move before, and you thought you could understand. If you had to go to a new school all of a sudden, with all new people, you'd probably be dreading it too. Even though you sort of maybe understood, you still weren't sure how to help. Okay, I'll see you later? No, I want to go back home. Right, Cove wanted to go back to his old home. The one that sat waiting someplace far from here. The one he would bring up whenever he felt this sad. It had been a while since he had moved in, but he didn't seem to feel any better about being here. You settled back down into the sand, trying to consider what to do. Do you hate it here? Cove's brow furrowed even more. Then he shook his head. You felt a rush of relief fill you. You liked having Cove here. It would be sad if he'd been miserable the whole time. You're not going to leave, right? You'll still be around. The question was a little surprising. Of course. Your parents would have mentioned if you were going to move or something, right? After a second, Cove gave a little nod. Once I get my cast off, we could go swimming. You were fine with him changing the subject again. Okay. You had to say swimming did sound fun, even if it was already getting chilly out. Cove smiled, then looked back to the waves. My dad keeps saying I'll get used to everything eventually, that I'd feel better then. It used to make me angry. I didn't want to get used to everything. You spared a glance over at Cove and see the anger had slipped off his face in favor of something almost puzzled. But maybe that would be okay after all, as long as I really do feel better. I can't see it. You could remember a long time ago when you'd first started going to school. You had absolutely not been okay with the idea of being away from your parents for most of the day, to listen to strangers tell you what to do and sit with kids you'd never met before. Things changing is hard. You're not quite sure what to say, so instead, you reach out and take hold of Cove's hand. The one closest to you is the one in the cast, so you make sure you are very gentle. As you watch, Cove's eyes got a little misty once more. You got the feeling that they were different tears than the ones from before, though. I hope, next summer, I'll surf and go exploring and everything will feel like it's supposed to again. You gave a little nod, resting your head on your own knees. The two of you sat quietly, just taking in the sound of the waves. You hoped that Cove would be able to accept this place as his new home. You'd definitely try to help in what ways you could. There were so many wonderful things here Cove probably hadn't even seen yet. Lost in thought, you started a bit when you heard a faint, familiar sound. The sound of your mom shouting your name. You looked over your shoulder, realizing it was probably time for dinner. Time had really gone by fast. You stood and dusted the sand off of yourself. My mom's calling. It's time for dinner. You should come. Cove looked at you, expression screaming reluctance, yet ultimately, okay. When you smiled, Cove returned with one of his own. Jamie, thanks.
Thanks.
It was nice, where you were right then. But the two of you couldn't stay there in your own little world any longer. You were being called forward. So the both of you ran off towards your house, leaving the waves and the summer behind. In between. Oh, okay. We can change things up again. Yeah, no, I'm gonna do it that. At this part, she's starting to, she's starting to have her feels of her true gender identity. Alrighty, so, we're gonna keep it this for now. Okay, I think we're done. Whoops. Okay. It's not letting me lower the interest, but I think, yeah, it's time for, like, the crush thing. Oh, yeah. Huh. I think, yeah. Yeah. It's a nice outfit. Yeah, I'm not gonna change it. Oh, yeah, that's his PJs, and this is, I don't know what that is. But yeah, that's fine. Whoops! I might have forgotten to do something. August ended, September began. It was time to go back to school. Lizzie groaned and complained the entire first week. She hated going to class. Still, there were interesting things to do that couldn't be done anywhere else. You weren't sure how Cove felt about it. He was enrolled that year. That was like a sign Cove would be staying in Sunset Bird for a while. At school, he was alright, but kept his distance from the other kids, from what you saw anyway. Whenever he could, Cove stuck to you like glue. He didn't even mind that much what you did to pass the time as long as it was together. Sometimes it was like things were exactly the same as when you had first met. But other times as you got older, you couldn't ignore how the feelings had changed in meaningful ways. That year, the divorce of Cove's parents was finalized. You overheard your parents talking about it, saying Cove's dad got full custody. At first you worried that meant bad news. It had made Mr. Holden cry, apparently. Then you found out it meant Cove would keep living with his dad. He would only stay with his mom a few weeks of the year. Cove cried too, for different reasons, you thought. It seemed like Cove and his dad might move again, but Mr. Holden decided to stay after all. Mom asked him about it once. He had said he didn't want to uproot Cove's life a second time. Mr. Holden tried to get Cove to like Sunset Bird more. He kept encouraging his son to go out and see the place. Sometimes Mr. Holden volunteered you to spend time with Cove. He seemed very confident that it was an effective strategy. Cove never talked to anyone about what happened with his parents and withdrew whenever it was brought up. It was hard for him, yet nobody knew how to help. Eventually Cove stopped crying on his own. You couldn't understand what had changed. But you hoped that you could help him feel better still, since even without the tears he looked sad. Maybe one day he could say out loud what he felt inside. After that, it felt like things had gone back to normal. Except what was normal didn't stay the same. Years passed and suddenly you were in middle school. You weren't a kid anymore, you were 13. That officially made you a teen, even if your sister didn't agree. The toys and crayons that used to litter every free space in your room had been packed away somewhere, replaced by new hobbies. There were other changes too. Cove's cast got taken off. It was weird to see him without it initially. Underneath the pink plaster ended up being a long thin scar that snaked across his forearm. Cove's chest puffed out in pride when someone drew attention to it. He also went through a major growth spurt. He was the tallest student in his class for 2 years in a row. Cove will probably hold that spot again next time. In class, people knew him for more than just being tall. He also stood out because of how well he did in gym and other athletic situations. Over the years, he began opening up more too. You saw him talking amicably with other kids or neighbors from time to time. And the only kid that came to visit the neighborhood when you were little Shiloh, well, he was gone. He and his mom moved back south because of her work, just 1 year after Cove came to Sunset Bird. It had been really upsetting when he left. Lizzie was inconsolable for weeks, but nobody talked about Shiloh anymore. It was a long time ago. You learned some heartbreaking things. Some heartbreaking things become less sad the further away they were, even if they had never gotten any better. That was sad in its own way. Things at home were different too. You still lived in the same house and all that, but it wasn't how it was before. Ma dyed her hair purple, wanting something new, and liked it so much she kept dyeing it. You remember calling her Mommy as a kid, but something like that seemed awkward nowadays. You were much too old for the word. Lizzie felt too mature for her nickname too. She insisted on everyone calling her Elizabeth, so you did. Your mom soon gave her permission to go places other than the playground and shopping street, which she took advantage of. You rarely saw her around the old neighborhood. In fact, she hardly spent time with you the way she did before. Elizabeth instead associated more and more with girls from school who were her own age. Maybe the difference between 13 and 15 was greater than the difference between 8 and 10. You started befriending new people yourself, like Derek Suarez. He didn't live in the neighborhood or go to the same school. What happened was his and Cove's dad struck up a business partnership a few months ago. Since then, Derek would pop up in the area now and then. It seemed Mr. Suarez was happy to let Derek tag along to his work, if Derek had the time for it. Without a doubt, everyone and everything around you had changed, in small and big ways. You had too. As time went by, though, it was easy to settle into this new normal. Then before you knew it, school was over, and summer vacation had come again. It was the first day of summer vacation. The sun was as hot as ever, but you were inside and away from its harsh rays. Alright, I think I'm going to call it a day right here, and we'll pick up from here next time. Again, thank you so much for joining me during this playthrough of Our Life. I am the Planet Rocks. Be sure to subscribe to my channel, hit the bell for notifications, and do like this video. Also, on the About section of my channel, you can find links to my Facebook page and to my Twitter page. Please do like and follow me on Facebook and follow me on Twitter. Thank you so much. I am the Planet Rocks, and I will see you next week.